Happy Monday, everyone. I am AnnaLee Dragon, the director of the Kinderhook Memorial Library, and it is National Library Week, which many of you may not know about. The American Library Association celebrates this week every year in April, and this year it is April 4th to April 10th, and so here we are on the 5th. And so I thought I would talk about some books this week that are library focused, library and librarian focused. We are an oft discussed group. I feel like people don't always, they talk about librarians and they make assumptions about librarians and what library life must be like. But I think the reality is often very different in many awesome ways and some difficult ways that people don't really imagine. So I thought we'll talk about some books that illustrate that and also just talk about the general love of libraries that Americans have, which is something I'm grateful for every day. So I'm going to put up a photo of a cover of the book and then we're going to discuss it. I will put all the covers again at the end, and all of these books are available either at our library or another library in the Mid-Hudson Library System, so you can go online and place requests and borrow them today, which is something I hope you do. I love when you guys borrow the books that I'm talking about. So let's get started with our first book, and here we go. So you saw the cover of the first book there. It is called Peculiar Questions and Practical Answers, a little book of whimsy and wisdom from the files of the New York Public Library. I happen to have this one here in person, and so I love the picture of the lion on the front from New York Public, which, as you know, I think the two lions are named Patience and Fortitude, which we have needed in the last year more so than in many other years. So this is just a collection of weird and interesting reference questions from the files of the New York Public Library. So they went into their archives and they pulled out some of the their favorite questions and answers. And I think that that's an interesting thing because I don't think many people think about the idea that when you're a reference librarian, which I have been for 16 years now, people can walk in and ask you anything. And I remember my first day on the job being very petrified about that because they expect you to have an answer or at least be able to find one. It's an overwhelming task for sure because there is so much to know and we certainly don't know it all. We just know how to find it. And that's the beauty of libraries. So I just thought this was a sweet little piece of library life that some people might really enjoy. It's not even chapters. They're literally just like little half-page stories, answers to questions and things. So it's real easy to kind of flip through and just pick out your favorites. And I just thought you might all enjoy it. So this one is written, I don't know that they have an editor even listed. They have illustrations by Barry Blitt, and it looks like it's written by the New York Public Library. So what better way to start National Library Week than with a book written by a library? So I hope that you all enjoy that one. And now we're going to get on to talk about some interesting librarians who have interesting stories themselves. Okay, here we go. As you saw there, the title of this next book is The World's Strongest Librarian by Josh Hargany, and the subtitle is A Memoir of Tourette's, Faith, Strength, and the Power of Family. So Josh is an interesting guy on many levels. First of all, I don't know that strongest librarian is something that is a title oft used. So I think that that's really interesting. And what that came from is he is a young Mormon librarian who is currently a librarian at the Salt Lake City Public Library. And he can also deadlift 600 pounds, which again, I don't think there's many of us that can do that. The strength training and librarianship do not often go together. But he basically, as he grew up, he was diagnosed with Tourette's syndrome and it grew pretty bad. The tics were really, really vicious at one point. And he was having a really hard time. And he encountered a man who was a strong man, a weightlifter, who helped teach him how to use weightlifting and other methods to control his Tourette's. And it really gave him like a boost in his life and made him go after things. So he joined the School of Information Science where he was and became a librarian. He also does the strongman competitions, and it really helped him. And so I think this is a really interesting story because librarians are often pigeonholed to be quiet, soft-spoken, women with buns, and I think it's really neat to remember that there are librarians of all types from all walks of life and drawn to the profession for different reasons. So we're not always what you'd expect, and I think this book is a perfect illustration of that. The World's Strongest Librarian by Josh Hargany. Okay, on to our next book. This next book I loved and read and enjoyed so much, and I have a copy right here in front of me. It's called The Badass Librarians of Timbuktu and Their Race to Save the World's Most Precious Manuscripts by Joshua Hammer. And I think what really got me on this one were a couple of aspects of it. One is that I think most librarians kind of harbor the secret fantasy of being Indiana Jones a little bit. And this book gave us that story from some librarians. But it also talks a lot about kind of the subversive nature of librarianship, in that we take our job very seriously and our profession very seriously, and that's connecting people and information, but it's also protecting the written word and people's access to it and their privacy. And so librarians have often been put in positions where they are kind of between the public and the government, and they always side with the public. Like, they're always looking out for their patrons and their users. And so that's a really important thing to know, I think, about us as a group, and I only hope I live up to that standard. So this book is the story of a number of librarians who, in order to save ancient Arabic texts from Al-Qaeda, pulled together and pulled off what they called a brazen heist worthy of Ocean's 11. I mean, who doesn't love this story? I want to know all about these librarians. They were in the time of unprecedented cultural destruction, and they stood in the path as protectors of the written word and everybody's right to read and remember what has been written. So this is a really cool book. It takes place in the 1980s. It's nonfiction, so it's the truth is stranger than fiction, but it really shows a strength of character and a lot of courage on the librarian's part. And so I loved it. I thought it was a great action story, but also just a devotion to the written word that librarians have, that I think is an important thing that we share with everybody. So if you haven't read it yet, definitely check out The Badass Librarians of Timbuktu. We could only all aspire to be as cool as they are. Okay, next book. This next book is a little slice of life for those of you who have thought about becoming a librarian or wondered what it was like. And I like it because I think it's a little bit of reality. It's not just the great parts, but some of the more difficult parts. So it's called I Work at a Public Library, a collection of crazy stories from the stacks. I think it is written by Gina Sheridan, and I think every librarian who's ever worked in a public library has these stories. They are often endearing and silly, or just unexpected things that you would not, think of. Like one of my stories, when I was a very first out of library school and working at a reference desk at a public library in upstate New York that I will not name. I got a call at the reference desk from a woman who had put too much soap in her dishwasher and it was making bubbles all over the floor, and she wanted to know what to do. I wouldn't ask me that question. I would probably have called my father or a plumber or somebody else, but I remember just saying, "Hold, please," and then quickly Googling, I trying to help. But so things like that come up that they just can't prepare you for in library school. So this book says stacked high with hundreds of strange but true stories, and celebrates libraries and their patrons. And it's just a fun little glimpse into what it's like to work at a public library, I think, in some, like I said, unexpected ways, things that are what make it so much fun and also what make it a challenge on a daily basis. So check out I Work at a Public Library. Okay, next book. So the next title is Part of Our Lives, A People's History of the American Public Library by Wayne Wygand. And so this says that it delves into the heart of why Americans love their libraries, and it has the history of the public library and testimonies from as early as 1850. And it's just everyday patrons who cherish their libraries and talking about why that is and how lucky we are to have them. There's a quote on the cover that says, "It is a bold challenge to conventional thinking about the American Public Library, an insightful look into America's most beloved cultural institutions." So it's one of those things that we all take for granted that libraries exist. But when you think about it, it's really kind of a crazy idea, right? People come in, they give you their name, you trust them to take out as many books and DVDs and things as they want, and they just bring them back. It's just a sacred trust between patron and library, and it ensures equity of access, and that people who can't afford to buy books when they used to be hugely expensive we also take that for granted. I think right now they're mass produced, but there was a point where that wasn't true, and you had to be very wealthy to amass a library of your own. And so the public library is leveling the playing field. It's really one of the last bastions of true democracy in a lot of ways. And I think that we are so lucky to live in a world where we're able to kind of take it for granted that these things exist and that they're available to all of us. So I think checking out this book will give you a good glimpse into what a world would be like without them, because it makes you think about all of the things that libraries do for our society and for our individual patrons and users. So I hope that you enjoy Part of Our Lives by Wayne Wygand. And then we have one more book I want to talk to you about. So this last book is called This Book is Overdue by Marilyn Johnson, and the subtitle is How Librarians and Cybrarians Can Save Us All. I wanted to end on this note because I think this talks about how we reached that point of the internet where everybody was bemoaning the demise of the public library. They'll never last, people won't need them anymore. And while there may be a precious few people who still think that, most people have realized that having a pile of information available online does not mean that you don't need a library or a librarian. It's like saying that somebody takes all the books and throws them in a giant pile and it's all there for you, but you don't know what to look for, or what to be, how to search, or maybe you don't have internet access at home and you can't search for these things. And so there's just a million reasons why libraries are still thriving, not just surviving in this day and age. So this book is, as they say in one of the reviews, a romp through the ranks of information professionals, from the blunt and obscenely funny bloggers to the quiet, law-abiding librarians gagged by the FBI. Johnson does for the library profession what Malcolm Gladwell did for the theory of memetics in The Tipping Point, which I thought was a huge compliment for this book. And I think she really talks about the range of types of people that are librarians, which has been a theme in this talk. But I also like that she talks about the subversive nature of the librarians gagged by the FBI. We sit down with toddlers and stand up with protesters, and we're there for moms and for young families and really anybody. That's the beauty. They're for lifelong learning, right? So I think that she's talking in this book about the importance of these functions in our society now more than ever. And I love that. I also love that the title is The Book is Overdue, because honestly, more and more libraries, including our own, have gone fine-free in recent years because we realize that it was an obstruction to access for a lot of people. And so we're looking all the time for ways to be more accessible, more open, more available, and more there for our communities. The community is at the heart of every library, and that's why we do what we do. So I really enjoy this book, and I hope that you will also. And I hope you will join me in celebrating National Library Week this year by using your library. Check us out, come borrow a book, have an appointment and pick something up. Pick up curbside, call the library and ask a question, watch a video like this or one of our others, but really enjoy this just gift that we have, which is the library, and the community is the reason we have it. So thank you to you all for your support, especially throughout this last year, which has been really difficult. You guys are the reason that the librarians here got up every day and did what we did, because we love you all and we miss you terribly, and we really appreciate all of the support you always show us. So let's all share in the library love this week, and I will be back next week with a different talk. I'll see you then, everyone.